everybody, thanks for joining. Welcome back to baking video number 2 that is going to be posted up on our YouTube channel for you to watch. Now hopefully you tuned in last week. Last week we made homemade butter biscuits and hopefully you got a chance to try that recipe on your own. For today we are going to make another very simple quick recipe, and today we're making raspberry oat bars. Now like I said, it's very simple to make and it actually doesn't have a lot of ingredients, just like last week's recipe. Now, the first thing I want you to do is wash your hands. Secondly, what I'm going to get you to do is you want to put all of your ingredients out on your table that you might need. So right now on my table I have my flour, my regular sugar, my rolled oats, I have my brown sugar, my salt, my raspberry jam that I'm going to be using, seedless or with seeds, either or, my vanilla, and my melted butter. And I have all of my measuring cups that I'm gonna need, and my wooden spoons, and my knives, and of course my bowl. Now, again, please feel free to pause the video at any time if you feel like I'm going a little bit too fast. So let's get started. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna want to grease an 8x8 inch pan. So it should be a square pan just like this. You're gonna wanna spray it with some Pam and set it aside for later. The next thing we're gonna do is we're going to put both of our sugars into this bowl and whisk them together. So according to our recipe, we need half a cup of regular sugar. So we're going to grab that. Now remember, for sugar, we don't actually need to scoop it in like we do with the flour because there's no air bubbles in sugar. So I'm actually just gonna scoop it in like that. Remember to level off your sugar with your knife. Again, this is half a cup of regular sugar, and you're just gonna put it directly in your bowl there. Next, you're going to put in your 1/4 cup of brown sugar. So I'm going to grab that. And with brown sugar, it's important that you pack it down. So what that looks like is I'm going to scoop my brown sugar here just like this, and I'm going to take the back of a spoon and just pack it down like this. That way I know that I'm getting exactly the measurement that I need. So 1/4 of brown sugar is gonna go in that bowl. Put that back. I'm just gonna take my whisk and I'm going to whisk the sugars together for about maybe 30 seconds. Okay, so now what you're gonna do is you're going to add in your vanilla and your butter. Okay, so for this recipe, it calls for half a cup of melted butter. So I've already done that. So what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna grab half a cup of butter and you're gonna wanna put it in the microwave in a microwave safe bowl and make sure it's completely melted. Now remember last week we were talking about butter measurements. The butter that I use are those little sticks of butter, and oftentimes the butter that you buy will have a little measurement saying half a cup, 1/4 a cup, and so on. So you should be able to find something that gives you a measurement as to what half a cup of butter is. So I'm actually gonna pour that in my bowl. With my sugar. Next, I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And you're going to add that directly in your bowl. I like to hold it right over my bowl just in case a little bit extra gets in. And that's no problem. It's not going to affect anything if you put a little bit too much in. Okay. So again, we have everything in our bowl so far, and we're just going to whisk it all together. Until it looks something like this. Again, maybe do this for 30 seconds. Okay, next we are going to add our flour and our rolled oats and our salt into this bowl. So according to our recipe, we need 1 cup of flour. So I'm gonna grab my flour, and with my flour, I do scoop it into my measuring cup because flour can have air holes in it. Little air pockets, which you don't want, because you want to be as exact with your measurements as possible. So I'm just going to scoop that in, just like that. Again, I'm going to level it off with my knife. Very important. Okay, I'm going to put that directly in the bowl, just like that. Next, I'm going to add my rolled oats. Now the recipe calls for 3/4 of rolled oats. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take my 1/4 cup and I'm gonna measure out 3 of these 1/4 cups full of rolled oats, and I'm gonna add them in my bowl. So that's 1, that's 2, and that's 3. Now, see how I didn't use my knife to level it off or anything. For rolled oats, it's okay to put a little bit extra in. It's not gonna hurt anything. What I did here was I just kind of scooped it like that, shook it off a little bit so it was relatively even. So that's my third 1/4 cup. So in total, you've put in 3/4 cups. Okay. Now the recipe calls for 1 pinch of salt. So I'm just gonna, 1 small pinch, just like that, in my bowl. I'm gonna put that aside. Okay, I'm gonna whisk these all together. Now, this is going to create quite a sticky crumble almost. And if you're finding it hard to mix, I would actually, with your whisk, I would actually use your wooden spoon, and that's what I'm gonna do actually, to make it a little bit easier for me to mix. Okay, so you're gonna wanna mix this for a while until you get a really good crumble texture. It's looking pretty good so far, but I'm gonna still keep mixing it. Okay, looks like we're almost there. Okay, so just like that, there's your crumble. And this is actually going to be the base and the topping for your raspberry bars. So what you're gonna do now is you're gonna wanna grab a small bowl from your pantry. Just like this here, just a small bowl. And the recipe says that you are going to take 1 cup of this crumble and you're going to put it aside. Okay. Just like that. So you're gonna actually just put it in this little bowl here. and you're gonna set it aside just like that. Now that is actually gonna be our topping for the raspberry bars. So you're gonna wanna grab the pan that you have greased ahead of time. Now what you're gonna wanna do is with the remaining crumble, you are going to pour it into your pan. Now this is where you're gonna have to use your hands, and you're going to want to flatten your base. You can also use like a spoon for this. I will probably be using a spoon near the end just to pack it extra good. But I like to use my hand first. So it's really important that you make sure you wash your hands before you start this, of course. Now I'm gonna grab a spoon here, and I'm just gonna pack it extra good. So I'm just gonna go over top of the whole pan, just like that. Make sure you get those corners as well. That's looking really good. Hopefully this is pretty easy for you so far. And always remember to pause if I'm going too fast. Okay. Now it's time to add our raspberry jam on top. So I'm using seedless raspberry jam for this, but it doesn't matter if you use jam with seeds in it. You can actually, either one is perfectly fine. You can use either one. Now this recipe calls for raspberry jam because it's raspberry oat bars. So I have only used raspberry jam for this recipe, but I'm sure that you could use strawberry jam if you prefer to use strawberry jam. So the recipe calls for about 1 cup of jam. Now it is important that you measure that for yourself. For me, I'm gonna use up almost my entire small jar of raspberry jam of what I have left. But for you, what you're gonna wanna do is scoop your raspberry jam into a 1 cup measuring cup before you put it onto your base. I hope that makes sense. So just make sure you measure your raspberry jam before you do that. But because I have a small jar just like this, I'm gonna use almost the whole thing. So I'm gonna scoop it just like that. Okay. Now I'm gonna use a spoon for this. I'm going to gently spread my raspberry jam over the base. Now this part might take a while because you want to be gentle when you do this, because your crumble bottom is delicate. But it's okay if some of it gets on the top, on the surface, because you need to put some on your surface anyways. You could also use a spatula for this if you'd like, but I'm using a spoon. So again, it is important that you measure your jam, but in my case, I want to use up the jam that I have. So I'm just using all of it. So you might find this a little bit difficult to spread, but that's okay. And don't be concerned if you have little flakes of oats coming up to the surface of your jam. Okay, that looks pretty even to me. So I'm gonna stop right there. Okay, so it's gonna look something like this. And this looks great. Now what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the crumble that you put aside and you're actually just going to crumble it on top. just like that. Now you'll see why it doesn't matter when you spread your jam if some oats come to the surface, because you're spreading a bunch on the top anyways. Just like that. That looks fantastic. I hope you're following along with me today, and I hope that you find this recipe pretty easy. There isn't a lot of ingredients in here, and pretty much you just mix everything in your bowl. That looks great. Okay. And it's as simple as that. So your very last step is you're going to preheat your oven to 350 degrees, and you're gonna bake this for about 30 minutes. Now, I say about 30 minutes because you're going to want to keep an eye on it. Once the edges are nice and golden brown, you can take it out, but it should be approximately 30 minutes. So again, you're gonna preheat your oven for 350 degrees and bake it for approximately 30 minutes. And then you're gonna obviously let it cool down before you eat them, and then they're ready to cut and serve. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you enjoy the raspberry bars. Make sure to send me a picture or two if you'd like. Once you're done, I would love to see what you made and what you thought of the recipe. Bye for now, and I hope you tune in next week.